Alright, so we're back once again, and today, as you can clearly see, we are playing the Thunder. And well, I thought this was quite a decent game, so I thought, why not take the time to go over basically my thought process in this game and see if it maybe helps out some players that are, new to the Thunder, seen as it is being removed from the armory relatively soon. So if you actually want to get this ship, you should probably get it relatively soon, because it is one of the best ships in the game. If you play CVs and you don't play battleships, get the Thunder. If you play DDs and have no interest in playing battleships, get the Thunder. If you play battleships and you don't have the Thunder, why don't you have the Thunder? It's the best BB basically in the game. Well, I say best. I'm sure there's some arguments you can make otherwise, but as you can clearly see from that salvo, it's a really good BB, and that's the topic of today's video, because this is an absolute stomper of a battleship. We start off with a Georgia that's been a little bit too overzealous, and so what better to do than shoot flaming hot HE at it and get several fires. Now there's two things here. You can probably say that the HE is ridiculous on the ship, and well, it is to an extent, but any good battleship knows that the one thing you don't do early is you overpush, and well, the Georgia is a prime example of overpushing. And what he meets is an Izumo, an Alaska, two DDs, and a Thunder, all too happy to take his HP pull from 77,250 to 0 extremely quickly. I test out the AP here just to see the angles and kind of like a test for other battleships if I do bump into any. As you can see, the Musashi's just positioned a little bit behind him, so it's kind of a test for that ship. But in his infinite wisdom, he decides to show more broadside, and I'm all too happy to oblige with AP, and as a result, well, we get first blood, we get an arsonist, and the game's off to a pretty decent start, to put it lightly. Now at this point we do have the strong side on this side of the map, hence why I'm rotating to push in to generate a crossfire on ships like the Groza Kurfürst and the Alaska to an extent. Now there is obviously the problem of the Musashi, but with the amount of power we have on this side of the map, I'm feeling pretty confident that we can deal with it without all that much hassle. Now again, you do have obviously the priority list, and no matter if that DD is at 13 kilometers away, i.e. the Jutland, and the probability of actually hitting him is relatively low. I'm waiting to see if he grounds right here, which I don't think he's going to do. You always target DDs first. Always. Unless obviously you get like a full broadside shot like I did on the Georgia, then you always target DDs first, even if you have AP loaded and even if they're 13 kilometers away. Because that amount of damage I just took off the Jutland can be the difference between a 1v1 between, i.e. the Jutland and the Kajero. Anyways, it doesn't really matter. It's not important. And, well, at this distance now, as you can see, the second criteria was met for shooting at a battleship over a destroyer, i.e. full broadside. But even the RNG gods couldn't help me there with actually hitting the citadel of the Musashi. And now, the Musashi may be a tier 10, but it's still one of a hell of a strong BB. And you just can't sit full broadside to a Musashi and expect not to take a hell of a lot of damage. Not even angling, you can't really expect that. But we do fire back, we do get a decent salvo, and unfortunately our Izumo does go down, and our Kajero goes down, and well, the push that we thought we had on the side of the map tends to fall apart very, very quickly. Now, another thing I want to talk about though, and we'll take it while we have a little bit of a break and someone pings me for, obviously not one-shotting every ship on the side of the map, is HE damage. And the actual impact this has on the game. Now, I'm not talking here about, it's oppressive, it's obnoxious, it's really hard to play against. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the actual damage that it does to an enemy ship. Because when you take into the fact that you can heal a hell of a lot of HE damage, a lot of its potential is overinflated to an extent, and it can really lull players into thinking that HE is the only shell type you should be shooting, when that's just not the case. And I'm very much an advocate for switching shell types a hell of a lot, especially in the Thunder. Now there may be some people who say that, you know, you should only be shooting HE in the Thunder, and that's just, well, for lack of a better word, it's very idiotic and stupid. Because the AP is something like, if you just want to shoot HE on the Thunder, just go play the Conqueror. There's no, I don't want to say there's no difference, because there'd be a lot of comments saying, oh, well, technically there's a lot of differences more than the AP, but you know what I mean. Well, I assume some of you will know what I mean. But the AP is still extremely potent, even versus something like an Alaska, which is an extremely tanky ship that's sitting bow in. Or even something like a Des Moines, any of those kind of cruisers that are generally pretty difficult to do damage to, bow in. The AP on the Thunder is very, very good at dealing with them. Now, we do get to the point where we have to be aware of the fact that the Jutland is in A, and luckily the Alaska does radar. So we do have a decent positioning on him. And at this point I'm thinking, okay, Jutlands should be at 14 kilometers away, but I want to actually contest A, so the risk of torpedoes is actually pretty minimal. Well, I do start turning in anyways, because even if there is no torpedoes coming my way, there still is the risk of a Musashi, but also that's coupled with the fact that I want to actually, you know, prioritize getting the actual cap. And even if I can't get into it, I want to actually have the, you know, the show of force to an extent that the Alaska can actually go into A and cap it. Now I know what you're probably thinking now. This enemy Alaska is just about to go down. Well, that doesn't really happen. As you can see, one of the shortcomings of the HE on the Thunder is that sometimes it just doesn't do damage. It'll get you fires, but it doesn't do damage. And I think that was shown also at the start of the game, where I got 3 fires on the enemy Georgia, but it didn't actually do any damage. All the shells just shattered. And well, this is another prime example of both a player playing extremely poorly, but also the strength of the AP. Getting a Citadel on the enemy Musashi. Now, unfortunately for us, we are up at 156k, but our right hand flank has completely collapsed in on itself, which makes the game extremely difficult. And as you probably know, the Thunder isn't the tankiest of ships. It's no Kremlin. It's no Groza Kurfürst. These ships do not equal the Thunder. So in that same vein, I'm in a very risky position right now, because at this point I'm not shooting, even though I had a decent shot on the Musashi, because I very quickly want to get angled, just in a certain extent, to in a way that I don't take damage from either the Petropavlovsk or the Musashi on my right hand flank, but at the same time I'm not vulnerable to the Musashi and the Alaska and the Soviet Soyuz on my left hand flank. But getting into that position is opening me up to taking a hell of a lot of fire, which is obviously unfortunate. But luckily I do manage to execute the turn with minimal to not that much damage taken, which is lucky for me, and instead engage in a 1v1 effectively with an enemy Musashi. And the one thing you want to know about the Musashi is that, much like the Thunder, it does pack a hell of a punch, but it's not the most tankiest of BBs. Kind of a bit like a Yamato, but I don't know. I always find Musashi's a bit easier to crumble than a Yamato. Again, at this point, with the way the Musashi is just angling right now, it's going to be incredibly difficult to actually pen him, so we're just going to switch to HE and hopefully farm him down to an extent. Here I have a bit of a fit. I don't really want to talk about it, but yeah. But yeah, sometimes the games go so lopsided when you're playing relatively well that you can't help but, you know, get a bit animated. But that being said, at this point I'm still in my head thinking, how do I maximize my gameplay? How do I maximize my good decisions? Because the game's effectively over at this point. There's no real coming back. But in my head, I'm thinking, okay, if I kill the Musashi here, I can rotate the ship back around, and then I can create an angle for my team, whereas they can go straight up the map, like straight up here, whereas I can go this way. This way we're actually having some kind of crossfire, and we have the potential to do a hell of a lot more damage. So you should always be thinking of, how can I play better? How can I do better? How can I maximize my damage from this position? And kind of forget about winning or losing a game, because winning or losing a game doesn't come down to other players. It comes down to you over a long period of time. And if you adopt that mindset over a long period of games, your win rate's going to go up. It's just a matter of fact. I mean, there's a reason pro players have a very high win rate, and not so good players have a very low win rate, especially over long match history. But with Salvo, we do get a high caliber, and we do reach 226,000 damage right now, which is pretty decent for the Thunder. It's a pretty good game. I'd say average for the Thunder would probably be about 110k. Yeah, 110k would be minimum. It's a bit on the higher side for most tier 10 BBs because it is such a strong ship. And well, there's not all that much to say in this game. We did take down the Georgia. We did try our best, but the game pretty much got away from us before we got a chance to really do anything in it, which again is a bit unfortunate. But you do have those games which seem to be happening more often than not these days, which whether you call it a good thing for the game or a bad thing for the game, it's a thing that's happening consistently. Luckily we are about to go down because we only have 7,000 HP left, but we do get the heal off, which means we should be able to survive another salvo from the enemy Musashi, and we are. But at this point the rest of my team is sadly collapsing, and our DDs are even dying at this point, which is not good. And well, it feels like that scene from Jaws where all the enemy sharks are basically surrounding me, and as the enemy team just says in chat, the dark is calling you, and indeed it is, but not today, because the one thing you can do is not die. I forgot I even said that. Anyways, the one thing you can do is keep maximizing damage, keep maximizing good shots, keep practicing that aim, and never let a defeat just tilt you out of oblivion. And at this point, my game is, I don't really care anymore, because I know I played decently well in this game. I know I made several good decisions. I know I aimed fairly well throughout the course of the game, and that for me is satisfaction enough that I played well. And with that, we got to 248k. The game ends. It's GG's, and I'll see you all in the next one.